Peppa Pig, The Night with Two Moons. That night was too quiet. No wind, no humming of the street lamps, even the chirping of crickets outside, as if someone had turned it off. Peppa woke up on her own without any reason. The hallway clock showed 2:47. George was softly snoring in his bed. She sat up and walked to the window, and she saw them. Two moons, one familiar, round, milky white, the other lower, darker, almost black, but not completely. Something glimmered inside it. Something moved. Peppa squinted and froze. They were eyes. Eyes on the surface of the moon, wide open, shining. No eyelids, no pupils. They didn't blink. They just stared down. Peppa recoiled and ran into the hallway. The light wouldn't turn on. The chandelier bulb barely flickered, as if the house itself had less power. She went down to the living room. Daddy Pig sat in his chair, but didn't move. The newspaper in his hooves, eyes wide open, not blinking. Mummy Pig stood in the kitchen as if she was stirring something, but the spoon didn't move. Only George upstairs continued to breathe, slowly. Mummy, Daddy. Peppa came closer, but they were like dolls, alive, but frozen. Then she looked out the window again. Both moons were still there. The white one, calm, and the black one was closer. Peppa felt something pulling her toward the glass. She stepped forward, then again and again, until her hoof touched the cold windowsill. The eyes of the moon blinked. In that moment, she screamed, or thought she did. No sound came out. The world turned muffled, as if the whole room was covered in thick cotton. The shadows on the walls trembled. The air smelled like something was burning, like someone had scorched paper. Peppa lost balance and fell. Then, darkness. She woke up in the morning, in her bed. George was still asleep. The sun shone through the window. One moon, the regular one, was gone from the sky. Everything was as if nothing had happened. "Good morning, Peppa," said Mummy Pig from the kitchen. "Do you remember the night?" Peppa asked. "What night, dear?" "There were two moons. One was black, with eyes." "You must have had a dream," Mummy smiled. "Sometimes dreams feel real." Peppa fell silent. George didn't say a word at breakfast. Even Daddy Pig seemed quieter than usual, as if everyone had forgotten, or pretended to. But when Peppa went back upstairs and looked at the mirror, it was fogged up, despite the morning, despite the sunlight. And on it, from the inside, were prints, two round marks, like eyes, and under them a faint scratch. One word, "I see." She stepped back. On the ceiling of her room was a circle of dimmer light, slightly darker than the rest of the room, as if something in the sky was still shining. But not for everyone. Peppa held her blanket tightly and told no one, because she knew the black moon would rise again. The visitor from the wall. When it was raining outside, Peppa and George were playing in their room. Everything was as usual, blocks, toys, laughter. But then Peppa noticed something strange. A crack in the wall right next to her bed seemed bigger than before, and inside it, there was something that looked like a face. At first, she thought she was imagining it. Maybe it was just a drop of water running down the wall. But when she looked again, eyes, narrow, dark, motionless, and a mouth stretched into a long, thin smile. Peppa blinked, and the face was gone. She didn't say anything to George. She just turned away and went to sleep, telling herself it was only her imagination. But the next night, she saw it again. The face was closer, and now it moved. Not quickly, no, slowly, almost imperceptibly, as if it was sliding beneath the layers of wallpaper. It was like watching a fish beneath the ice. Its eyes moved. They were watching Peppa. Peppa told Mummy Pig, but she only said that maybe the wall was a bit damp. Daddy Pig promised to patch the crack. But when he entered the room with his tools that evening, there was no crack. On the third night, Peppa woke up to a rustling sound. George was asleep, covered completely with his blanket. Peppa slowly turned toward the wall. Now the face was very close. It filled the whole crack. And then it came out. First came a hand, grey, thin, with long fingers like it was made of paper. Then the second hand. It was pulling itself out, blending with the colour of the wallpaper. Its body was flat, as if it had always been part of the wall. It made no sound, only movement, slowly, smiling. Peppa couldn't scream. She was frozen, watching as the thing emerged. It had no legs. Its lower body just faded into the air. It slid across the floor, leaving a wet grey trail behind. It approached George's bed and stopped. A few long seconds, and then it disappeared. When the parents came in the morning, Peppa was sitting on her bed staring at the wall. George was asleep, but he never woke up again. The doctors couldn't explain it. They said his heart just stopped. Since then, Peppa no longer sleeps in that room. The wall was painted over, new wallpaper was put up. But sometimes, if you look closely at the pattern, you can see it shifting, as if something is moving underneath, and if you stare long enough, it smiles again. Peppa Pig. The school that isn't there. It all started on a Monday. Madame Gazelle told the class that today's lessons would be held in the old building, a place where children used to study long ago. "It's just nearby," she said. "A short walk, for a change of scenery." Peppa was surprised. No one had ever mentioned another school, not teachers, not even her parents. The children walked along a narrow path outside the town. The wind grew stronger. The sun hid behind clouds. Soon, a building appeared, grey, cracked, with tall, narrow windows. It was unnaturally quiet. "Is it on the map?" asked Pedro. Madame Gazelle smiled but didn't answer. Inside it was dim. The walls were stained. The doors creaked. They were led to a classroom at the end of the hall. Desks were crooked. Chairs didn't match. On the board, faint scratches remained, as if someone had written with a nail. "We're only here for one day," said Madame Gazelle. "Start drawing." But Peppa couldn't focus. The classroom window faced an empty field. But each time she looked away and back again, it felt like someone was standing behind the glass. Footsteps echoed in the hall, though no one had left. Sometimes there was a soft creaking sound, and then whispers, very close to the floor. During break, the children walked to the stairs. "Let's go up," Zoe suggested. Madame Gazelle appeared suddenly. "You mustn't go upstairs." Her voice sounded strange, muffled, as if coming from far away. The day crawled by slowly. The hallway clock didn't tick. Pedro said the mirrors in the bathroom were all covered with paper. Rebecca noticed Madame Gazelle's coat had buttons sewn on the wrong side. When it was finally time to leave, the children were relieved. But it was already getting dark outside, though it should have been early afternoon. Madame Gazelle told them to walk in a line. Peppa lingered, looking back. Figures stood in the windows, still, shadowy. They didn't move, but they were watching. That evening, Peppa opened a map on her tablet. The school they visited wasn't there. She showed Daddy Pig. "We were here today," she said, "but there's nothing on the map." Daddy Pig looked closely. "There hasn't been anything here for years, Peppa. I've walked by that spot hundreds of times, just a field." "But we were inside," Peppa insisted. Daddy shrugged. "Maybe it was a temporary structure, something old, but it shouldn't be there." That night, Peppa couldn't sleep. Before bed, she opened her backpack. At the bottom lay a scrap of paper, dusty, crumpled. On it, a message scratched in black charcoal. "We are still here." Peppa Pig, the letters on the wall. It started with a single phrase. A small message, as if scratched by something blunt. On the wall by the stairs, right under the handrail. Daddy Pig first thought George had been playing with a sharp toy block. "Who wrote this?" he asked at breakfast. "Not me," said George. "Me neither," added Peppa. "What does it say?" Daddy Pig frowned. "You forgot me." They thought it was just a childish prank. Mummy Pig wiped the wall with a damp cloth, and the writing disappeared. But the next morning, it showed up again, somewhere else, near the kitchen door. Same words. "You forgot me." "Mummy," said Peppa, "maybe it's leftover chalk. Or someone's drawing at night." "No one's drawing, Peppa. It's just a coincidence." But on the third day, the writing was in Peppa and George's room, right next to the bed, written by a small hoof, tiny letters, crooked pressure, as if whoever wrote it was rushing or didn't know how to hold the chalk. "I didn't write it," Peppa repeated. "I swear." "Maybe you just don't remember," Mummy said gently. "Maybe it happened in a dream." But Peppa hadn't been asleep. She remembered clearly. And that night, she woke up to a soft sound, a scratchy noise, dry, like something scraping against plaster. She sat up and saw the bedroom door slightly open. Light from the hallway fell on the wall. And there, in the shadow, something moved. Peppa couldn't see a face, only a hoof, scraping against the wall, again and again. When she turned on her nightlight, the figure was gone. But a new message had appeared. "You erased me." Now the writing showed up every day, in the bathroom, on the wardrobe, under the table, even on the inside of the window glass, all written by one hoof, all saying the same thing. "Who is it?" Peppa asked George. "Maybe it's someone you forgot," he whispered. On the sixth night, Peppa woke up and saw someone writing on the wall right in front of her bed. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The figure didn't turn around, just a shadow, a shape, and when the message was finished, it melted into the darkness, quiet, smooth. "You were me." Peppa shivered. Her eyes moved to the mirror, and she saw a reflection, herself, almost. But the one in the mirror didn't move, didn't blink, just stared, and words began to appear on the glass. "You took my place." In the morning, Mummy Pig called her for breakfast. "Peppa, aren't you hungry?" Peppa didn't reply. She didn't feel like herself anymore. And on the wall above the table appeared one final message, written in that same crooked hoof writing. "Now you are forgotten." Peppa Pig, the wrong drawing. It started quietly, almost unnoticed. George was quietly sitting at the kitchen table with crayons and a large sheet of paper. Daddy Pig was sipping tea. Mummy Pig was reading a magazine. Peppa came closer and saw George was drawing children. "Is that your class?" she asked. "Yes," he nodded. "All of them." In the drawing stood Rebecca, Zoe, Pedro, Danny, everyone Peppa knew. But they all had the same eyes, black dots. Their smiles were long and flat. They stood in the same pose, arms hanging down, on a white background. Even George's dinosaur was drawn, a bit to the side and with the same eyes. "Why are you drawing them?" "Just so they'll be here, always." Peppa frowned, but said nothing. The next morning at school, the teacher said Rebecca didn't come in, then Zoe didn't come, then Pedro. Every day someone was missing. No explanations, no notes from parents. "Maybe they're sick," said Mummy Pig. "All at once," Peppa whispered. One evening, she walked into George's room and saw him drawing again. Another sheet, the same figures, the same emptiness. But now there were shadows in the background, long, like the sun was shining from behind, and their eyes were different, darker, deeper. "What is this?" "They're standing, still. You didn't draw me too, did you?" He didn't answer. Peppa went to the drawer and pulled out the old drawings, all the same, and each time, someone disappeared in real life, but appeared again on paper. That night, she woke up. The nightlight flickered. The room was cold. George was standing at the door, holding a piece of paper in his hooves. "I drew you," he said. "George, please." Peppa's heart started to pound. "You're standing in the back of the class, next to Rebecca." "I don't want to. I shouldn't be there." Too late. He stepped closer, showed her the drawing. Peppa looked at her image. It was empty. No eyes, no mouth, just a silhouette. And at the bottom of the page, a note. "You're the last one." Peppa tore the drawing from George's hooves, ran to the kitchen, and threw it into the stove. The paper caught fire. She waited until it turned to ash. But when she turned around, George stood at the door with a new sheet. I remembered it. That night, she locked her door, shut the window, hid the crayons. But she still heard scratching on the floor. Steady, slow. In the morning, she opened the desk drawer. A paper lay there, blank. Only in the corner, a faint shadow, small, shaped like her, and a note. "It's already too late." Peppa Pig, The Cracks. It started as just a tiny line, almost invisible in the corner of Peppa's bedroom. She thought it was just a crack in the paint. Maybe someone had bumped into the wall. "Mummy, look," she said that evening, pointing. Mummy Pig glanced over, nodded and said, "The house has probably settled a bit. Nothing to worry about. Daddy will fix it." But Daddy forgot, and the crack stayed. The next day, Peppa noticed it had grown longer. Now it stretched upward slightly, like a tree branch reaching toward the ceiling. "That's strange," she muttered. "Maybe I'm imagining it." But each day, the crack grew, first thin, then a little wider. After a few days, it curved unnaturally, like someone had drawn it with a finger. More cracks appeared nearby, one, then another. "Is our house okay?" Peppa asked Daddy Pig. "Of course," he laughed. "Walls crack sometimes. We'll fix it." They never did. A week later, the whole wall was laced with thin cracks. Some of them vanished during the day, only to return by night. One night, Peppa woke up and saw the crack moving, slightly, as if something inside was breathing. She got out of bed and walked closer, pressed her ear against it. Inside, a sound. Very quiet, scraping. A knock, slow, 3 taps, a pause, 2 more. Peppa jumped back. "George," she whispered. Her brother was asleep, breathing steadily. In the morning, she found a small, dusty scrap of paper beneath the crack, very old, almost falling apart. On it, a single word, "Open." Peppa didn't tell her parents. She covered the crack with bandages, several layers, then hung a picture over it. But by nightfall, the picture had fallen. The tape was torn away. New lines appeared on the wall, not cracks anymore, almost like letters. She backed away to the door, but the door wouldn't open. Something inside the wall was moving, slowly, like it was exhaling. She screamed. Mummy and Daddy rushed in. It's, Peppa gasped, pointing. But on the wall, nothing, no cracks, no words, just a perfectly smooth surface. "You probably had a bad dream," said Mummy Pig gently. "Let's try to forget about it." But Peppa couldn't forget, because that night, when she turned to face the wall, she saw movement right where the crack had been, and then a voice, a whisper. "I'm almost out, don't turn around."